I think it is funny how many people hold on to that knowledge as kind of a sense of security, right? Like, oh,
Hmm.
I'm not gonna let them know the tricks of the trade because I don't want to be out of a job. Well, if we learn to embrace our replacements, that just makes us irreplaceable, right? If we can pass down that knowledge that we have, then, and we're building other people up, then we've made our job even more secure. We've shown that we can grow that pool of talent, right?
Welcome to Verify Infield, the Millwork podcast. Here's Jacob.
Well, welcome back to Verify Infield, everybody. Today I have a good friend of mine and a special guest, James Drury. He is Director of Training and Development at Master Millwork and has lengthy background in the millwork industry and millwork and in engineering. Spent some time with Microvellum, spent some time in industry, and excited to have him on to talk about his background, his journey in millwork, and his role today. Thanks for joining today, James.
No, I appreciate the opportunity and to be on the other end of this. It'll be good. I'm excited for it.
Awesome. Well, to get started, if you don't mind, telling everybody a little bit about your background. How'd you first get into millwork and what led you to the millwork industry to start with?
Oh man, depends on how far back we want to go. So I wish I could say it all started with a high school woodshop class, but truth be told, that was a class I failed. It was the first period of the day, and half the class was spent in the classroom, and the other half was spent out in the shop. So I didn't actually wake up and kind of get going until we were out in the shop. So you can imagine, when you spend half your time asleep in a class, it's not exactly A grade material. Yes, pun intended. But no, from there, what really kind of got it going for me was I was working at a ski in, ski out hotel in Deer Valley. And during the off seasons, they would close down for 6 weeks and lay off, probably 80% of the workforce. A lot of turnover when you have a setup like that, right? Because maybe about 5% of the people would come back after the off season. But, I was young, had a young family. I didn't want to follow that route. So I was like, you know what, let me see what I can do to still be employed during those off seasons. So I started looking around the hotel, finding projects I could do. Built some back office cabinets, built a new concierge desk, one that kind of matched our front desk. It was like an Austrian themed hotel. It had a restaurant in it. So I built a new wine room for them as well. So it was kind of like my first taste of woodworking, kind of, I say, as a job. It was, they were still projects, but I was getting paid to do it. I think it was 2006. The chef and restaurant manager of the at the hotel left to do their own thing. They started a new restaurant right off of Main Street in Park City, and asked if I would do the bar and cabinetry for them. So, all right, yeah, we got this off season. I got 6 weeks to knock this out, and man, let me tell you, a one man crew trying to knock out a restaurant. It was tough, but it was a lot of fun. So that's really, I say, where I kind of discovered that this could be a career, right? That there's more to it than building stuff in your garage. So later in 2006, my wife and I, we were just kind of looking for a change. My wife, born and raised in Texas, so cold Utah winters were not her thing. So I was like, all right, well, let's give Texas a shot. All her family is down here. I've been to visit a few times. So we decided to move, but before we did, I was like, I gotta have a job first. I'm not gonna move us all down there and then spend however long searching for a job, right? Just so happened that her family, all growing up, grew up with the Kaler family, who owned the Kaler Company, which is an architectural millwork company and a general contractor. So they kind of hired me sight unseen just because of the family connection there, and threw me out on a bench, right? And it was great. I learned real quickly how much I didn't know about cabinetry and casework, millwork, all that, especially after just coming from building this restaurant bar and the cabinetry there. It was like, oh man, I could have done this a lot easier, had I known. But no, it was great starting out, but just as my wife learned about cold Utah winters, I don't do well with Texas, right? I The shop experience was great, but I was like, man, I need some air conditioning. So, so I was looking, for an opportunity, to kind of make my way into the drafting department. But I mean, yeah, that's kind of where I got my start. I've been in it ever since. I've really enjoyed this industry.
So about that time, I think, or maybe a couple years later, is when you and I crossed paths. Probably started on the Microvellum forums, and as you know, Microvellum users, were from our respective companies, kind of learning Microvellum. And I don't remember if it was cross paths on the user advisory board or what it was, but obviously you made your way into the office, you made your way into the drafting and engineering team, and started really diving in head first to Microvellum and learning how to customize it and kind of wield its power for your needs, right? That was what came next for you.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, it didn't quite happen that quickly or easily, right? I mean, working out in the shop, seeing the shop drawings that were coming out. I'd taken a few AutoCAD courses back in high school, so I knew I could replicate what I was seeing, and so went home, drew up some elevations and sections. Went to our shop foreman and was like, "Hey, man, I want to get out of the shop and into that office. Like, give me a chance." And he looked things over. I talked about it with the powers that be, and I got that chance, right? And just so happened too that when I came in, they were right on the tail end of implementing Microvellum, and so I was like, "Oh, great! It's not AutoCAD that I'm going to be using. It's going to be Microvellum." And when I first started training, I remember seeing the software, and I'm just like, "Man, this is AutoCAD on steroids. Like, this is awesome. Like, just gonna draw walls, drop in some products, adjust some prompts, and boom, it's ready to go to the shop." Well, then we got into the spreadsheet side of things, right? And I was like, okay, well, I've messed around with Excel. I know a thing or two. I can auto sum. I can, format cells and whatnot. And then the first formula I saw, I was just like, well, that's it. I'm going back out in the shop. This might as well be Chinese because I don't understand any of this. But no, so I decided at that point, one, I don't want to be back out in the heat. So I got to figure out how to learn this. And so I just really dived in, right? Googled everything, YouTubed everything, just trying to figure out, why does this gigantic formula do what it does? And then just over time, you learn a little bit here and there. And next thing I know, I'm creating parametric products from blank spreadsheets and things like that. So that kind of started getting me, further ahead. And yeah, eventually took over managing that department at the Kaler company, which involved, yeah, a lot of library customization, report modification, just really tailoring it for our needs, building it around our guys. And then, yeah, you mentioned the user advisory board and the forums. It was, I don't remember when that was exactly, but I think it was late 2000 teens, somewhere around there. The Microvellum had their first tech con in 2014, and so that's kind of where I think I got my foot in with some of the people at Microvellum, Lenny and David and Clay and those guys. And then, yeah, I think it was a couple of years later, you were at TechCon as well, and you were showing me, everything that you were doing with formula-driven materials, and man, I was blown away. Like, I remember leaving, just with a fire lit, all these ideas running through my brain of just, okay, how can we take it to the next level? How can we, fix things that continue to be problems, especially when we get into the material side of things. Everybody has different ways they want to name things or whatever. So it's like, those formula driven materials were a way to standardize so much. And so I was really, really intrigued by that.
So, and for context for everybody, you mentioned, I think 2006 was around when you guys went back to Texas, or that you moved. And so you're coming up on 20 years of woodworking industry, right? And I think that's important for, those who are early career looking at this and trying to understand, like, what does my potential future look like? How long does it take to get this type of experience? But I think it's also important context because you're now in a role as director of training and development, which you or I didn't have the benefit of having somebody like you to teach us, right? When we were coming up, it was, as you mentioned, hey, Googling and trying to find information and trial and error and, what resources we can, which ultimately I would imagine is a big motivation for your role now, is how can you make it different for people coming up today in our industry, right?
Right. Yeah, I wish I had, somebody kind of take me under their wing back when I got started. I remember the guy that was training me, and like it was just so kind of all over the place that eventually I was just kind of like, all right, I just need to, start with a clean slate. Let me just almost forget everything he taught me and just learn the way I know how to learn. And so, yeah, it's definitely been a challenge over the years to get to this point. It's been a crazy journey. I never thought, it would take me to the places that it has. So I think it's awesome to know that there are so many different kinds of opportunities in this industry. Yeah, I mean, as far as like this role is concerned, the thing that really drew me back to Master Millwork was the team that we had before. Most of the guys are still here. We've added some additional people. I just really appreciated the chemistry that we all had the first time, and we really were looking at things together. We were collaborating a lot. We would do, being remote, we would do what we called open work sessions, where everybody just kind of pop up a Teams call and just kind of work together. And when they had a question, they'd share their screen. And we just kind of, I say work in silence a lot of times just to avoid distraction. But, when those things came up, we were right there to help each other out. That was one of the things that I was missing when I left Master Millwork the first time. Like I went into, I went back to Kaler and I kind of got into operations manager was my title there. So I was fixing problems, started off with revamping the estimating process and things like that. But I really wasn't engaged with anybody else. I was just kind of like tucked in a corner, like, hey, here's the problem, fix it. I don't know. It felt like I was missing my purpose, if that makes sense,
Yeah. So can you talk a little bit about, this is a new role, Director of Training and Development for Master Millwork, right? What are some of the kind of the goals and the purpose of this role? Why is, Master Millwork obviously is putting money and time and effort investing in something that's very important that not a lot of companies have the means or the time or kind of the ability to do. So can you talk a little bit about the motivation from Master Millwork and from your perspective of what's driving this to be such a dedicated effort?
Yeah. So Master Millwork has seen a lot of growth over the last seven plus years. I mean, I went from a shop with maybe 5 or 6 people in the beginning to an 80,000 square foot shop with lots of automation, probably about 100 people maybe or so in the shop right now, about that many out in the field installing work. So the growth that they've experienced has just been exponential in that short amount of time. And so the goal for them is they want to take on the bigger projects, right? They want to establish themselves as a leader of high-end millwork. And that's not an easy thing to accomplish, right? Especially when the talent pool is shrinking rather than growing. So the need for this role is then to take the knowledge and experience, for those high-end millwork projects and bring up the people to be able to do those, right? We've got people with all different sorts of skill sets and different levels of experience and understanding. And it's great to see somebody who's new to the industry, but, is tech savvy, suddenly learn that they can do all this work and they enjoy it. And, for us to be able to continue that growth and take on those projects, we have to grow our people to grow the company, right? We can't have one or two guys that can do the really hard stuff and everybody else is just kind of in the back filling in work where need be. Everybody needs to be able to get to that level where we can delegate those different projects out and expect the same kind of quality that our top guys would do. That's our goal here, is to build everybody up to where we can evenly distribute all that work.
And so how would you say your experience, in your background in the industry, experience as an engineer, how does that influence or shape the way you approach today, training and development?
Regarding, the training and development, I mean, obviously my experiences as an engineer working in a millwork shop definitely helps, especially having that shop floor knowledge has definitely helped. But really, I think what helped the most as far as, getting to this point in my career was being with Microvellum as a service provider. So, I don't know if you recall, you probably do. There was a time I was looking for a change. I interviewed with you and the company you were working for, and it's kind of a weird story, but in the short story, we were both serving on that Microvellum advisory board, and it was my last meeting with the advisory board, and I mentioned that I was going to be leaving. I was going to start working for my dad and in his company. And 2 days later, David Fairbanks, the owner of Microvellum, calls me up and he's like, "Hey man, we want you to be a service provider. Are you ready?" I'm like, "Am I ready? Like, what are you talking about? What's a service provider?" I didn't know what all this was. So a service provider goes out, provides training, helps with implementation of Microvellum for the companies that just bought it, right? And started off, I shadowed one of the trainers, and it went well, So it didn't take me long to get my first solo training job, and I remember it so clearly, man. It was like we were in a little conference room, had it thrown up on the big TV in there, and just training was just going. It was just flowing, clicking. Everybody seemed to just be understanding, getting right along with it. Even the owner was throwing in scenarios, of like, what about this? What can Microvellum do this kind of product? And I'm like, yeah, let me show you how you do that, And I left there and I was like, man, crushed it. Like that was awesome, right? Well, then the post-training review came back and they were like, "We don't feel like we can use the software." And I was just blown away. I was crushed. I was devastated. I was like, "What are you talking about? Like that couldn't have gone any better than it did." Right? And then I realized, well, shoot, I'm training somebody based on how I learn, and not everybody learns the way I learn. Right? I like to get into the weeds really early on because I like to know how all that comes together, how that all clicks. But not everybody learns that way, and not everybody needs to learn that way. So it was kind of a hard and humbling lesson for me at that time. And then kind of same thing, like when I got into Microvellum the first time, I'm like, I'm not giving up, and dig in, find better ways to communicate, to get my point across, to learn how how people learn, and what they need to be able to read the room, so to speak. So, that has definitely played a huge part in what I'm doing now, and being able to see the different skill sets and levels that everybody's at, and be able to tailor specific things to those individuals, and explaining the why. I think that's the big thing, right? I think that's what a lot of new people, coming into the industry miss out on. right? They don't understand the why. Why does grain direction matter? Why does this button do that? Why does this formula calculate to that, right? But it's explaining, okay, we're gonna add a part here, and here's the reason why we're gonna add that part, and then just continuing to explore the why to the point where they're not being taught what to think, they're being taught how to think. They're able to identify problems and issues before they arise. They're able to think past an obstacle and create a solution. That's I think probably the most beneficial skill sets anybody can have is being able to just critically think, right? Versus just being told what to do.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I remember running into those similar instances where it was I would develop a process or I would train my engineers and in the way I like to do things or the way I knew how I'd figured it out and very quickly realizing like, okay, just because this works for me or I can understand this process doesn't mean it's really the best way for my whole team to do things. And quickly hitting those obstacles of like, okay, I'm training you guys on a process that I've done 1,000 times. Why can't you get this? And realizing, oh, this is just the way I think. That doesn't mean it's the way my team thinks or the way my team comprehends the process or how to do things. And so I think that's imperative to understand when you're in a role where you're teaching multiple people how to do something. One is you have to be able to have a process that is everybody can understand, everybody can replicate and repeat. But two, as you said, different people learn different ways. And a lot of times something I learned, I took a teaching course in high school actually, is, you can learn by listening, you can learn by watching and seeing, you can learn by doing. And I think the more of those different avenues you can engage when you're teaching, the better people grasp the concepts. And I think after your time as a service provider, you actually started writing content and curriculum and training for Microvellum. Was there anything you learned from that process of actually, okay, now I'm going to sit down and I'm going to write training content, training curriculum that made you one that you've carried with you that has made you think differently about training people?
Yeah. So an example I always like to use when we would discuss this, you think of a puzzle, right? You could split a group of people into 3 separate groups, and you can give one all the puzzle pieces and just the puzzle pieces only, right? Maybe give them some written instructions, right? Piece 1 is going to go here. Piece 2 is going to go here. Group 2, you're going to give them the puzzle pieces, but you're going to give them the box to look at. And then group 3, you're going to give them the same puzzle pieces, give them the box to look at, the picture to look at, and have some written instructions as well. You'll quickly find out which group is going to put that puzzle together faster, right? And I think that was ultimately kind of what I was missing in my first attempt of, training with Microvellum is basically I dumped that box of puzzle pieces out on the table, and it was just explaining, how they go together. It wasn't showing what the finished product was going to go look like. I wasn't explaining, well enough the steps or why, the pieces go together in the particular order they do. So when it came to creating training curriculum and content, it was, okay, let's give the big picture first, right? We're going to work on this. We're going to create this product here. And then we jump into the steps and we go back and we check and we look and we see, how close are we? Are we getting any closer to what it was before? Yeah, it's starting to really take shape. All right, let's dive into it a little more. Then, like 90% there, maybe there's some custom stuff that we have to get into. And it's like, all right, now let's dive into the more detailed stuff. How do you, modify a machine token, or how do you move a part individually inside of that product? And then at the end, everybody gets it. They see that their finished product looks just like the product that they were supposed to build. But anytime that picture wasn't up there and I'm just standing there and I'm teaching people, you're going to move this part 3 inches to the right, it was like people were grabbing the wrong part. They were moving things. Everything was just, out of whack. And it was nowhere near what the finished product should have looked like. So that was a big thing with creating, content and curriculum was, how do we just kind of get the holistic view first and then dive into the details. So yeah, I think that's very important for anybody who's looking to create any kind of training for their company is start big picture first and then dive in after that.
Awesome. So talking a little bit about, we talked about training, we talked about your role and your perspective on that. Ultimately training is to develop talent and develop people. And you mentioned this a little bit, is that, for Master Millwork, realizing that, okay, for us to grow, we have to grow our people, we have to develop our people, and they grow the business. And everybody that I talk to in this industry, and this has kind of been the case for years, and is, the talent pool is shrinking and it's becoming more and more difficult to find talent that, not even just to train them, but to find talent, right? Can you talk about a little bit about, from your perspective, that struggle in our industry? What are some of the barriers to recruiting young talent? And, how have you gone about resolving that issue, finding good talent that is trainable?
First off, I think the biggest misconception about our industry is that it's a hobby. Right? First thing somebody thinks of when you throw out the term woodworking, especially, is, oh, you're building something in your garage, you're working on a home project, you're doing something along those lines, right? I don't think people realize, how much of an industry is actually out there. So, visibility and awareness of the industry are big thing, and something that we have to change. And I'm gonna steal a phrase from David Fairbanks. My time with Microvellum, he used to walk around and he'd say, we need to make woodworking sexy. And what he meant by that was, we've got to make it visible, right? We've got to make it enticing to where people want to come into this industry. And, truth be told, it already is sexy. We just got to flaunt it, right? And that's where the visibility comes from. So for young talent, young people who don't know that this exists, I definitely think, up in your game as far as social media is a must. It's probably the first way that people are going to see that something exists. You're showing the steps and the process of something really cool that you're assembling out in the shop, right? I remember building this or engineering this big multifaceted wall feature that, extended between the first and second floor of this building. It was so cool to engineer it, but to see it on the cameras, again, I'm remote, so I'm not in the shop, but I had a camera feed where I could see them putting this thing together, and they built a faux wall to match, the existing site conditions, and pieced this whole thing together, built this whole thing up in the shop. And it was so cool to see that. But I saw it. Nobody else did, right? Nobody saw that process. And it's like, had we been more on top of our social media game, I think we could have been putting out some teasers, every now and then of what that thing was. What are all these weird pieces that are coming together, and then boom, here's the final product, and boom, here's the finished product installed. That goes a long way for just bringing visibility and awareness to the industry. Some other things that come to mind just with, our younger generation is technology, right? Again, a misconception with woodworking is, oh, you're just using hand tools to build things, right? Maybe you've got a table saw, or you've got a miter saw or something that you're, able to cut things. But, for the most part, they just view it as, oh, we've got a hammer and nails and maybe a drill and screws putting something together. It's like, there's so much more than walk into, any modern shop these days, and you're going to see a lot of automation, CNC machines, point to point, material handlers, all those things are, being run off of programs that are generated, using software like Microvellum. There's somebody behind the scenes that's making all that happen. And so, our younger generation is definitely more locked in on technology. And so getting them to see that, I'm going to steal another phrase. I can't exactly remember who said this, but the millwork industry is a technology industry that happens to use wood as its medium, right? And I think, again, the more our young people see that and realize the technology that goes into it, I think they're going to be impressed with what's available.
There's two good points I want to reaffirm that you made. One is about marketing and social media, and I think for the vast majority of our industry, their online presence consists of pretty much just commenting on a GC's post of we're happy to be a part of this project, and or at best some pictures of work. But I think people struggle with, why are they creating content? Why are they on social media as a company, as a millwork shop? And in general, everybody sees it as a means to gain more business, which it should be that. It is that, as leads for that. But our millwork shops don't get business by, it's not a direct to consumer business. It's B2B, and we're gaining relationships with other contractors and stuff. And so what very few, if any, do is create content that makes people want to come work for them. And I don't think anybody realizes how vital that is and how easy it is, frankly, to improve this specific problem, which is the talent crisis, by having a presence. Because the first thing anybody under the age of 40 does when they apply for a job, or they get reached out to by a recruiter or somebody for a job, is, well, I'm going to go look them up and see their website. Are they on LinkedIn? Are they on any other platforms? Like, what does their presence look like online? How can I find out what kind of company they are, what kind of work they do, what's it like to work there? And if all you see is nothing, or a couple posts about, hey, look at this project we did that everybody else can do the same thing, it's all right, well, I don't really know what I'm dealing with. But if on the flip side you see, content about not just the work they do, but how they do the work, what their shop looks like, what their office looks like, what their people look like, what their culture is, it makes a big impact. And two, people want to be proud of the work they do. And especially in our industry, where it's so hard for us. I remember for years, like, my wife didn't even understand what I did as a job as a millwork engineer, and trying to explain to my family, well, here's what I do. Oh, so you make cabinets? Well, yes, sometimes, but it's a lot more than that. And trying to explain all of that, when it would be so great if the company I worked for has content online and I could be constantly sharing posts, like, hey, here's a project I did. Hey, yeah, I engineered that. Here's it being built in the shop. Hey, look how awesome this is. Oh, wow, that's what you do. Okay, now I understand. And I get to be proud of the work that I'm doing, and I find more value than just a paycheck in what I'm doing. And I think so many companies are under the gun, don't have time, and they don't realize the value of something so simple as putting a little bit of effort into putting any content out there, how much of an impact that can make to solving this talent crisis.
Yeah, and I think, especially in today's day and age too, with AI, it makes that process even easier, right? AI is not going to go anywhere. We got to embrace it. But you mentioned the time it takes to create a post. Just throw it into AI. Give it some context of what you're trying to achieve, and it'll create it for you. Then all you got to do is share. So it doesn't have to be more difficult than it has to be. Well, obviously, the human connection side of that, might be missing with those AI generated posts, but at least it's a foot in the right direction, right? For anybody who's looking to get started, that's a great place to begin. Yeah. So, but you're absolutely right. I mean, I do the same thing when I'm looking up a company, even business to business, right? I mean, what kind of is this? I'm going to go back to when I was, estimating at Kaler. We would get a new GC that would submit a bid to us, and it's like, okay, well, let's see what these guys are up to. If they don't have a website or a social media presence, it's it's very hard to, vet them, right? You can't, just say, oh yeah, these guys are, they do great work. Let's jump in with these guys. It's like, what are we getting ourselves into? So yeah, being able to do that research, whether you're looking for a place of employment or looking to do business with another company, I think that presence is a must. Um, another thing, when it comes to recruiting younger talent too, I think it's very important to have a culture that encourages and fosters learning, right? Everybody's going to make mistakes, right? We all know that. Nothing's perfect, but your attitude towards those mistakes is what's going to change the people around you, right? It's easy to point fingers. Oh, so and so messed this up, or that was so and so over here that didn't do this right. But to like at Master Millwork, for example, when those mistakes do come up, we look at them in depth. Why did this happen? Not whose fault was it, but where did the problem start, and how do we fix that moving forward, right? The only bad mistake is a mistake in which you don't learn from it, right? So that learning culture and that culture of being able to, it also encourages ownership, right? When you make mistakes. If it's not so much about pointing fingers, it's very easy to say, yeah, I missed a step. I'm the one who made that mistake. We can talk about it and figure out what to do next, right? So much easier to have that kind of a environment when that culture is being created. I also,
Yeah.
oh, go ahead.
Well, just on that point, I think it's important that, because if we're in this industry complaining about people not wanting to join our industry and people not having experience, but anytime anybody tries to come in and learn, if we treat them like crap and, don't help them, don't teach them, if we're the guy in the shop that's like, you don't know anything, what are you doing here? But also, I can't find good help these days. Nobody wants to learn. Nobody wants to do the hard work. That's the problem.
Yeah.
Like, we have to be able to invite those people in, give them the opportunity to learn, understand that we were there one day as well. And we have to be willing to invest the time and it takes to teach and learn and make mistakes and grow from that. And it's we can't be both complaining about nobody wanting to join our industry, but also gatekeeping from anybody wanting to join our industry.
Right. And that's something that, I've really been adamant about, and that's mentorship, right? I think it is funny how many people hold on to that knowledge as kind of a sense of security, right? Like, oh,
Mhm.
I'm not going to let them know the tricks of the trade because I don't want to be out of a job. Well, if we learn to embrace our replacements, that just makes us irreplaceable, right? If we can pass down that knowledge that we have, then, and we're building other people up, then we've made our job even more secure. We've shown that we can grow that pool of talent, right?
You're infinitely more valuable if you can replicate yourself by teaching other people than you are as just, I'm going to hold this knowledge and I'm only as valuable as my personal output. And I think people don't realize that, like, you're actually worth more and add more value by being able to teach other people, because you can do that over and over again.
Yeah. The more people you have that can do what your top guy can do, the more you're going to grow, the more success you're going to have. So, at Master Millwork, one of the things that really impressed me going back to the shop is just how much or how young the workforce is there. Like, you walk out into the shop and it's very young for, most of the industry that you as you go to visit different shops. I think that mentorship mentality is a big factor in that. So when we hire, new recruits, especially out in the shop, they're paired up with one of our master craftsmen and they're learning directly from them and getting those skills from the get-go that will help them grow, right? Those critical thinking skills and just the fine-tuned skills that took them, years or decades to learn. One of my favorite quotes is from one of our craftsmen at Kaler. This is when I was out on a bench, and just everything that he created just looked flawless, right? I'm like, man, how do you make your products just look so good? And he just kind of laughed and chuckled. And he's like, not about doing good work. It's about covering up your mistakes. And there is a lot of truth in that, right? Because you are going to make a mistake, but you can't always just start over, right? You've got to find a way to, work around that. And that always just stuck with me after he said that. I was like, man, it's not about doing it right and doing it perfect. It's, when those mistakes come up, you got to find a way to blend those in or find a way to, hide them so, it's not going to affect that final product. But, if they're holding on to that information, what good is that going to do for our industry, right?
Absolutely. Well, James, what changes or innovations do you see in the future in our industry over the next 5 to 10 years that are going to have an impact?
Well, I mean, I already mentioned AI. It's not going to go anywhere. So that's going to just help with processes all around, right? With the creating training, content, standards and processes. It just makes all that a lot easier. Machinery and automation is going to just continue to improve, especially with the aid of AI. So I think we're going to see a lot more of that. So with that, then, what I hope to see is more of that mentorship mentality, right? I mean, everything is going to progress, almost automatically just because of technology. But what's not going to change unless we make the change is that human connection, that person to person relationship, passing down those skills and that knowledge that, our older and experienced generation have that our younger generation does not yet. So that's what I hope to see. But again, like I said, it's going to come down to us being able to accept that and be willing to pass all that on.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, awesome, James. I appreciate you taking time out to speak with us and share with us. If people are interested in finding out more about Master Millwork and the work you guys are doing there, or you in general, what's the best way they can reach out and find out more?
Yeah. I mean, easy way for me, we can get connected on LinkedIn. I know I've been talking social media here, but that's really the only social media platform that I personally use. LinkedIn is a great way to get connected with me. To see what we're doing at Master Millwork, go check out our website. You'll see an example of the projects we're doing. We are growing. We're hoping to get a shop established here in Texas. So we are really anxiously and aggressively, searching for those big projects that'll help speed that process up. So hopefully, moving forward, we can share a little bit of what we're doing on that front. There is a post that I've got on LinkedIn right now that people can follow along with, and that's where we're trying to get more of a shop immersive experience for our remote workforce. So, dedicated computers and camera feeds for our different craftsmen and their areas. So as soon as they're working on a work order that they need to ask questions, they can jump right on with the engineer and screen share or walk around and show what's going on the bench and work through those and create a really tight feedback loop. So we're just in the initial stages of that. So there will be more posts, coming up following what that is looking like. But I'm really excited to get that part going. So yeah, I mean, that's really the best way to reach out and get connected.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, James. Always a joy when we get to hang out and chat. And looking forward to everybody hearing your insights on training and development and seeing the work you do in the future there.
All right. No, I appreciate the time, Jacob, and looking forward to seeing what you continue to do in this industry. I appreciate everything that you've done so far, and the visibility and awareness that you've brought to it. So we all just need to do more of the same.
Absolutely. Awesome. Thank you, James.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. Do you want to stay up to date about industry insights, new content, and our community of millworkers? Go to ductworksmw.com to sign up for our newsletter. I'll see you in the next episode of Verify Infield.